you want to go from just a simple use case to putting together the right team. Then after you've put together the right team, you have to figure out, what's the best way for you to do that? Should you hire? Should you do it internally? One way or the other, you're hiring somebody. Then who do you put in charge of that team? Then how do you pick out your use case? How do you find your lowest hanging fruit, create your MVP, and so on? So we have a lot of questions, a lot of ways to think about it. And with me, I have Dustin, Greg, Vittorio, and Prashant. So I'll let you guys, hi. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves briefly, and tell the audience one thing interesting about you that no one knows.
Greg, you're first.
Thank you. Goodness. Okay, so my name's Greg. I lead conversation design at Salesforce. I've been at Salesforce for a little over 6 years and founded and started the department and practice of conversation design about 2.5 years ago, and have been building the team ever since. Something that folks don't know about me, I feel like, so at least maybe folks on this call may not know about me, that I am a certified yoga teacher.
Oh, okay.
So that's something that I did right actually at the beginning of when I started at Salesforce.
Very nice. What kind of yoga?
I trained in Ashtanga Vinyasa yoga, which my joints no longer allow me to do. So I did a little bit more Iyengar and Kundalini and Yin yoga after I finished my training.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, you know what, Dustin, you're next.
I was gonna popcorn it to Dustin.
Okay, you popcorn. Greg, you get the popcorn it.
Yes.
We'll do the popcorn.
I had such a fun chat with you on the fireside earlier. It was really fun. Good conversations we had. So, hi everyone. I'm Dustin Dye, and CEO, co-founder of Bot Copy. Yep. We are a web and mobile app interface for Google Cloud Dialogflow. So if anybody is dabbling in the Dialogflow sphere and wants to deploy chat experiences to their website, feel free to reach me. Fun fact about me is I am, put me on the spot here. Yoga instructor was good. I have a 10-year-old brother that is full brother, and I am 32. Took a twist. So that's kind of a fun fact.
Yeah,
parents are still active and having kids at their age. Hey, it's the end of the day, trying to spice things up here. We're still talking about chatbots?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a fun fact, right?
Oh, that is a fun fact.
Someone else.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm just going next since somebody was picking it up. I'm Vittorio Banfi.
Dustin was going to go ahead.
I'm Vittorio Banfi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bot Society. Bot Society used to be a conversation design tool that I think maybe somebody in the audience know. We're now in the process of changing the strategic direction of the company. We're going to announce what we've been working on, hopefully not too far into the future. So if you're interested in about what we're going to do, make sure on Monday to go on botsociety.io and you will find a way to stay updated. You will find a new website there. A fun fact about me, I was going to say I'm a good cook, but after what Greg and Dustin said, it's not fun enough. So a fun fact about me, when I was a teenager, I grew up in Rome, and I loved to visit the Colosseum at night when nobody's there. So if you ever go to Rome, you can go at the Colosseum at night. It's surprisingly open, and you can look at it under the moonlight, which is an experience. Yeah.
You have to fight off like tigers and bears and things like that while you're doing that, but it's very cool.
I was about to say, I was like, that's how you end up with a 10-year-old brother.
And become a yoga instructor.
Yes, exactly.
So I think Prashant, you're next.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Prashant G. Boyer. I am a Microsoft AI MVP, but I don't work for Microsoft. I work for a company called AIS as a cloud solution architect. AI MVP or Microsoft MVP, just additional recognition like Google Cloud Developer or AWS heroes. And fun fact about me, I think most of the audience, this is the first time I'm speaking at this conference, so they may not know, but I actually traveled and worked in Antarctica for 1.5 months, and that too on a US government station. So if anyone would like to have a nice getaway from your day-to-day life, US government needs a lot of professionals in Antarctic continent. And you can do any kind of jobs over there. You can be a cook, you can be a woodcutter, you can be an IT person, like they need tons of people. And US government has the most, like the biggest station over there. It's called McMurdo Station. And every year during the summertime there, which is typically November to February, they need at least 1,000 people in that station. And everything is paid for. Only money you can spend is on booze, which there you'll get very less opportunity. Like there are not many varieties there. So a lot of people I have seen they are PhD students or they are going to the school, but they just want to have a different kind of experience, save some money. They just go and work there for 6 months. And if you are brave enough, you can do the entire winter over. But winter means everything outside will be dark and you will be just confined to a small rooms, and will be like living with maybe 50 to 60 people, and that's about it. That will be your life.
Can you drop a link in the description?
About everyone's gonna quit their jobs in conversational AI.
Sure, I'll do that. So if you had to Google or Bing, a lot of government contractors like Raytheon, and there are some other contractors who has. So the National Science Foundation is the main government agency, which is the sponsor of most of the programs there. And they have outsourced these jobs to the government contractors like Raytheon and other contractors. And I was one of the fortunate students. Like I was a student there and my professor was doing research, and that's how I got into it. But I will post a link. Like while the session is going on, I will find some links and post in the chat window. So if anyone's interested, they can definitely check out the job openings.
Wow.
Very cool.
Yeah, very interesting.
Stefan,
Awesome.
is this
So let's
the direction you thought it would take when you asked us?
No, I had no idea. I thought it would be interesting things. Yoga instructor, baby brother. Hey, that's why we ask, right? So, all right. So let's see. We're going to talk about zero to launch. So this is the zero to launch panel. And so we want to think about, well, if someone's coming in, and we'll think of it from the point of view of time, right? The companies come in, they're listening to us talk for the last 7 hours, 8 hours, and now they have some idea of like what they should be doing. What would your next steps be? How should they think about the project in terms of the timeline from zero to launch? And Greg, it seems like you're thinking hard, so you can go first.
Poor Greg.
I need to control my face. I feel like usually if you don't make eye contact, the teacher won't call on you. And that's what people are looking for. I mean, I think my first question within that context is like, what's the scope? So like, what exactly are we trying to deliver rather than like, because I have to be able to balance the scope against the timeline. So for example, if they want to deliver, a Jarvis in 6 weeks, then I can be like, well, no, that's not happening. So let's take our expectations down there. But I think that's sort of like where I would start in terms of like, okay, so what's the MVP? What exactly are we trying to get into market? How is it a market differentiator? Who are our competitors? How are we going to potentially supersede certain aspects of the competitive market? and then from there reverse engineer. Okay, so then based on that, if the timeline is non-negotiable, once we've kind of negotiated the scope to a degree, then that will determine how much we need in terms of resourcing. And then from there, it just becomes math. And I will stop looking confused.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the most important thing to this zero to launch is where to start, right? And I've seen too many projects fail on not understanding where that is and starting too big. Like, why?
Yeah.
You know, let's be honest. If you're getting 100% of phone calls going to a live call center, and we narrow that down to 95%, that's a win, right? Okay, let's start there. And let's build on top of that, because these chat experiences have longevity and we can build more and get better over time. But if we try to tackle 100% out of the gates, then you're going to fail. It's like almost guaranteed. And even with $1 million budgets, it's just too much. Like, one thing I always tell people to look at is like, okay, if you're making a job post right now to fill this void of what you're trying to get the chatbot to do, who are you going to hire? You're not going to hire Superman, you know? And if you could, great, but you probably don't, that isn't in the budget. And if we're going to narrow things down, what are the 2 or 3 skill sets that you're going to employ them on that they're going to be able to do and show up on the first job, like first month of work, and say, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to get really good at this task. And then once I figure that out, well, there's probably going to be other opportunities to move forward in the company. Like, let's treat chatbots with a similar light and move the project forward based on starting small, do that job very well, and then take where you've kind of messed up or you've gone off the rails in that process, learn from that, and present new business opportunities to get better. That's what I got to say about that.
That's good. So don't try to hire Superman.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
I mean,
Vittorio?
No, I completely agree with both of you. I think to the point that Greg was making about the scope, I think that's an incredible important exercise, not only in terms of timeline, but also in terms of the success of the project. Because when the scope of a chatbot is well defined, users understand the chatbot more. Designers understand what to design. Engineers have easier time training the data set. So because it's easier to select which data makes sense and which data to ignore of the existing data set when the scope is clear. So I completely agree on that, when you're starting out, deciding what not to do is incredibly important, and it's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because especially if you're leading a project, you probably have to say no to some people's idea or to your own ideas. So it's an uncomfortable position to be in. But I think the moment you get over that awkward moment and you manage to align your team, your organization, your project around a defined scope, then everything else gets incredibly easier. So you're basically paying upfront a little bit of uncomfortableness in order to get to a timeline, a budget, an objective that is very much achievable. That's my experience, at least, working with customers and clients, because it's hard to say no.
Right. So I mean, already I think that maybe to some degree you guys will agree with this, is essentially what you want to do first is have a clear goal, and then define that clear goal with the clear scope. And then Prashant, what would you add to that? Because I know you bring like a more of a architecture point of view to this, whereas the rest of us are more on the designer side of it.
So I think Greg, Vittorio, and Dustin had covered most of the important factors really well. One thing I would like to add is, as Greg mentioned, it is really, really important to set the level expectation. Like, we're not going to build Javas here. Like, we are limited to whatever the AI services we have at disposal. And some of the AI services may not be accessible to a particular enterprise. You had to just go with what kind of access you have. And also the number one factor that I have seen is when it comes to the wish list is more like a long, but if you convert that to actual dollar amount, how much amount the enterprise is willing to spend, that's where you have to find a balance. Okay, you want to climb the mountain, but what's your budget? Let's start with that. How much money you are willing to spend? Because guess what? Even though there is a lot of potential, it takes some time before we can show the return on investment on all the investments we are doing on this conversational AI project. So apart from what Greg, Victoria, and Dustin added, I will say just find out how much you're willing to spend, how much your budget, and go with that. So that way you can identify what's the smallest problem you can solve in that particular budget, and then go from there.
Got it. So next, let's say imagine that you've done this and you've done this well, right? So you came to the Chatbot Conference, so you know what to build. You know that you're not trying to build Java, so you know that you can't hire Superman at a Batman budget. So now you're Victoria, you're funny. So now you're you know what you're doing, okay? You all have it all scoped up and you're going for the lowest hanging fruit. What would come next? What do you suggest? What's the next part of the journey?
Framing.
And framing?
Yeah.
Well, okay. So would you say framing, or would you say like putting together the team? Like where does that part come in?
Well, I think like before you even put the team, well, depending on the team is like a huge piece. Like if you don't have a team in place and you're just one person trying to build all things, like Greg, you made the point earlier, like a construction worker designing like the interior of your home or something. Like, it's a great point. You need multiple people in the team. You need a conversational designer, a developer, probably a business analyst to understand like what the return on this project is to keep it alive. But if we're starting small and like framing ourselves around, okay, we got this idea of what we need. Like if it can fill this void within the first 3 months, that's going to keep this project alive. Mm-hmm. How can we frame the conversation so everybody walking up to this chatbot or communicating with this chatbot doesn't ask it about the weather? So let's frame the conversation to help people understand what this chatbot was built for in the first place. Because without, like, I've seen too many open-ended chatbots, like, hi, how can I help you? And it's like, not by that. Like, you can understand, it's like, let's get a little more specific here. Like, it's just too vague, and it's just opening like the door to randomness and going what we call off the rails. So why not say, hey, I am this chatbot here to help you with X, Y, and Z. Please select below. Or if X, Y, and Z isn't helpful for you, then tell me what it is and I'll find the right person for you. Because it's okay to not understand as a chatbot in the beginning. And just like it's okay as an employee to not understand when a question comes in, if you're answering the phone, to say, I don't know. But it's not okay to just say, please try again. It's not okay to say, I'm sorry, I just don't understand. Could you try in a different way? Let's come up and really think about, is there the frame of what we've built originally? Let's keep them on track there and spend a lot of time if they go off track. And this is just in the beginning, like prior to launch, spend a decent amount of time on these default messages to help either get them back on track or collect a bit of information so you can go find someone who knows how to answer that question and get back to them appropriately. And if you can figure out those two things, like where to start and framing, your chat projects are going to be way more successful out of the gates than trying to do everything all at once.
Totally agree. I think the same also applies for like in constructing the team. Like it's kind of, I feel like a chicken and the egg question, but I lean more towards like if you frame it and scope it tightly first, that can actually help you better hire and build the right team and give them the kind of direction that's needed in order to give the project success. So for example, like I couldn't agree more, Dustin, like I firmly believe in creating a sort of pillar of work around what are we not supporting. We need to be super clear as a team, what are we not supporting? What is out of scope for this bot? And then how do we make that clear to the user and make sure that that is properly resourced? Because like you said, like without that, then you end up with a bot that oversets a user's expectations. And potentially you also end up with a lot of scope creep. I spend a lot of time with engineers, so scope is like that's like my my bread and butter. But I think that as you kind of tightly frame how you're going about the project, then that's when you can determine, okay, so how many engineers realistically do we need? If the majority of our work actually is in being able to, out the gate, in the beginning, set up a basis for the things that we're not going to support, maybe that actually does require a little bit more engineering lift, and therefore we should put it there. But if we're using a declarative bot builder for the rest of it, which we know, okay, we've already scoped that we're going to maybe do an intent for, log a case, return an item, and check the status of an existing case. Okay, those are the three intents that we're going to support, that we don't necessarily need as much engineering over there because those types of things are able to be produced on a declarative platform. So I agree. I think that kind of thing can help you really determine how you go about hiring and staffing your team.
And Greg, in your experience, what's a good breakdown between the different roles? So obviously there's going to be some proportions. Scope matters a lot, but generally speaking, if you could speak in generalities.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think part of it, again, is going to depend on the scope of what it is that you're trying to deliver and in the timeline that you're delivering it. So at Salesforce, we work on a release cycle where we have 3 major releases a year. And each release is about like a 3 to 4 month long period. I can answer from the perspective, okay, what do I think the ratio should be at Salesforce in the sense of, for every team that's delivering a Slack app, that's going to require a little bit more heavy lifting because we just acquired the company, we're still integrating the product, et cetera. But for someone who's maybe trying to create an Einstein bot, that might be a much lower lift because that's a much more mature product. So I think it's, if you don't have, and also like it depends on the kind of conversation designer you have and what sort of expertise they have in their skill set. If there's someone who skews more on the side of AI training, but is less, say, maybe proficient in the copywriting or the information architecture piece of it, then you're going to have to figure out how to compensate for those skills through other roles. Maybe you bring in a UX designer to do the IA, and you bring it, by IA, I mean information architecture or the flow of the conversation. And then maybe you'll need a copywriter or someone who works in marketing, or ideally customer service, someone who works in a chat center perhaps, to do the language design. So I would say that ideally, at least at Salesforce, the way that I do it is I have set up my team such that each designer is a full stack conversation designer. So I'm the hard ass that asks my designers to do all the things. So you have to be able to do the IA. Yeah, and you have to be able to do the usability testing all the way through. And so that's part of how I make the resourcing argument at Salesforce. Like, if you didn't have a full stack conversation designer, you would need some kind of engineer to help build whatever customization you might need against the platform. You'll need a UX designer to do the information architecture, a copywriter to do the copy or the language design. You'll need some kind of business analyst, like Dustin said, about how to prove this out. And you'll need a UX researcher to test the experience. And then I go in and I'm like, or you could give me one magical headcount and we'll fix all your problems for you.
So yeah, this is very interesting, Greg, and thank you for sharing the way you're thinking about this. I think in the industry, the idea of a full stack conversation designer is still kind of on the cutting edge. So I'm very excited that you're articulating this for the community. Thank you for sharing that. I think I wanted to say a couple of words to the folks who are more maybe resource constrained, or they're doing the first conversation project in the company. And my suggestion is have at least one designer. That's very important. Like we see some projects that started kind of like a technology experiment without any design thinking behind it, and that I think it could have been okay maybe 4 years ago when the technology was still very, very mature. But I think now it's even a little bit dangerous, because now you have machine learning system that is just turning around without much design thinking behind it, and it can backfire. So it's finding full stack conversation designers, as Greg was mentioning, is still a rare thing, and I'm happy there's someone like Greg, training those folks to get there. But even if you can't get a full stack, at least one person who's in charge of the design thinking behind this kind of systems is extremely important. And if you take into consideration, for example, even Marlinda's talk just before us, I think an hour ago or so, if you missed it, check it out in the recording. If you think how much inclusivity would have been lost without design thinking for all of those interactions, it gives you a sense of like how the direction of your project can go without you even noticing if there's nobody in charge of the design thinking there. So the ratio should have a formula that says minimum one. That's the point I was trying to make, especially if you're resource constrained. And that ensures that you have some sort of balancing in your experiment, as small as the scope can be.
Yeah. So we're coming up on time here pretty soon, right? And I know people can't wait until they get to the virtual world and start drinking. See, Dustin, he's already become a cow. So last question. Last question. I want everyone to answer, because you guys bring different perspectives, especially Prashant. And that is that, let's say that what your scope, your goal, you've defined your scope, you've defined what your scope, what's out of scope, right? You put together your team. Who do you want to lead? You have that full stack designer, okay? Should that full stack designer lead, or should developers lead, or should the PM lead? Who should be the leader of the project to move it towards its goal? And then also, obviously, situation matters, because in some situations maybe you want one role versus the other. So, and we can make it succinct in the next couple of minutes.
Okay, so I can go first. So if we are lucky and if we have that full stack designer on board in the team, then definitely that person should lead. But those people may be handful right now in the industry. And let's say if you don't have that, then I will say you should have a combination of designer and PM working very closely together, where PM is providing more direction in terms of the budget and timeline and making sure we are on scope, and designer is making sure we are developing a good experience there. Because when it comes to developers and other supporting staff, it all depends on what kind of tool you're using. There are some tools out there where you don't need a lot of developers. All you need is a really good designers who can tell you what kind of experience you need, and using those tools, then you can build those experience. So that's my 2 cents on that.
That's music to my ears, Prashant. Yes. I couldn't agree more. I was actually thinking like, if there's someone who kind of has like that, like I think
experience.
Oh no, like I'm thinking like that the leader, like kind of like getting concrete about like what we mean by leadership. Like, so there's the shepherding of the project step by step, milestone by milestone, getting to completion, getting to market. And then there's like, what is the vision? What is the direction? And where are we going? And the visionary person doesn't necessarily have to be the taskmaster. So you could have someone who's like, at Salesforce, we call them technical program managers, but the person who's essentially like making sure that all the operations on the ship are happening, that can be the PM. Maybe it's the developer. I mean, developers are really great at doing that. So I kind of think, leaving that kind of like, I'm always impressed by how developers can organize getting toward the end of a project. So maybe that person, but at least someone who can help with the operations, and then someone leading the vision. And I think the vision would be great from design.
Any last words, Vittorio and Dustin?
I completely agree with what Prashant was saying. I think that's the right framework. It's hard to give a one-size-fits-all answer because it really depends on your organization and on the type of product or project that you're working on. But I think as a general framework, I really like that approach. So yeah.
Dustin, that's a great answer right there.
all of the positions are very important. I don't think a project stays in. I don't think a project stays around without a business analyst like understanding the ROI. It's fun. It's great projects. Conversational designers, developers, they're all extremely important. But if you can't pitch the project and show results, then the likelihood of it staying alive and shifting to an alternative experience is low. So they're all important. If I had to pick one to lead the project, I'd probably want to be data-driven. Riot Games was one of the most data-driven clients that we'd ever worked with. Incredible. They had a full team. They were pushing our interface at Bot Copy to several different features that we didn't have. Their team was just constantly wanting more and more. They are an amazing team to kind of model off of, but their project was driven by the project manager who really, really understood the ROI and was so data-driven on, Greg, kind of what we were talking about. I forgot it was still Cal. The nice thing is being a cow is I can drink this glass of wine that's here and I'm not like as obvious about it.
Right. No one knows what you're doing. That's your secret.
But back to the Riot Games example, it was like the most symmetry that like as far as a team, like all working together. They had a designer, they had a developer, and they had a PM who was like, she knew her shit. Honestly, she was like incredible. And pushing us to like, hey, like we're doing these crazy tests and it turns out like once it's here, the percentages drop to this degree and I can't get like another $1 million budget because of X, Y, and Z. Can you guys deploy this feature? Because I think this feature, based on everything that we've done, is going to increase these percentages and overall happiness to this next level. And whether those hypotheses were right or wrong, it was like sound. And she had like reason for approaching and increasing new budgets and moving the project to the next level that keeps the chat experience alive today. And if you go into Riot Games or play any of their games, you can log in, it's going to recognize like your account, you can chat with the experience, and it's incredible. And the whole team has to do with it being incredible, but the project is alive to this day because they could prove it had return. And their return was 100% on deflection, on like ticketing and making sure that the chatbot would stay alive if they could reduce their deflection from their email ticketing by X%. And they did a great job executing that project. So PM.
Awesome. Let's give Dustin a big round of applause.
Thank you. Hey.
Hey. Awesome. So next is happy hour. You could be drinking wine or beer or milk, up to you.